The main reason most of us go into business is to make money. More and more, though, companies are searching for purpose too. One of the ways in which they get that is to give some of that profit that they earn away. This is Tonight. I'm joined by Pelham Jones, Director and Chairman of the private Rhino Owners Association. He also runs RAGE, the Rhino Action Group effort. Also the Chairman of the Association of Non-Profit Organisations, Dumie and Ndlela, to discuss establishing and running non-profit organisations. Pelham, it must be one of the hardest things in the world to do, because if there is a rand, there must be thousands of organisations wanting as much of that 1 rand as possible. They are giving us phone calls, they're standing at shopping centres on Saturday morning, and they're all begging for airtime to justify their cause. You guys are demanding.
Well, it's an interesting question, because we are seeing an economy that is in a downward curve. We have what's known as donor fatigue, and that is where it's so critical for there to be absolute credibility amongst these various NGOs who are raising money, and there has to be accountability that the money is being spent effectively. We have seen on the Rhino side, and through RAGE, we receive funding. It gets divided into really 3 categories. We see money being raised and being spent in a fraudulent manner. In other words, there is no money going to save the Rhino.
There may be no charity in place at all. Yeah.
Absolutely. Then we have money being raised and being spent on projects that are ineffective or naive. And then, of course, your third category are money that goes to organizations that are credible, are accounted, are audited, and effective in what they are doing.
Now, as a donor, as somebody who wants to feel good about giving money to a cause, whether it be to save children or rhinos, whatever the case might be, you want your money to go to category number 3, the credible ones. How do you tell the difference between those that are credible and those that are not?
Well, in terms of your market sophistication, there are varying levels. At top level, i.e. your corporate, you would expect some kind of a due diligence.
Absolutely.
One would expect to go onto a company's website, an NGO or an NPO, verify facts. Are they registered? Are they audited? Who are the directors? Where is the money going? In other words, what are the projects? And it's really a matter of doing an assessment. Would you put money into a can shaker at a shopping centre? Well, if he's part of a credible organisation, the SPCA, yes, certainly, support it. But certainly ask the question first, is this a recognised body?
Is that the problem, though, with that sort of approach, and it may be the right high-level approach, is that so many non-profit organisations are fairly informal. They do good work, but they lack the checks and balances that Pelham would like to see.
Okay, on our side, what we do, we make sure that the non-profit organisation comply by being properly registered, and they comply with all the government departments. And then we make sure, even if the donor wants to fund an organization, we can be able to see, besides the display of the NEMO and the NPO organization, the donor can go to the government website and check if that organization is active, or is submitting their returns annually, or it does have audited on regular basis.
Absolutely crucial, because we also have a situation in South Africa where there's so much need and there's so many different causes that we've got a plethora of organisations that require money. Do we have too many organisations in South Africa, do we?
There's quite a number of non-profit organisations, because most of the people register non-profit organization for the reason that if you run an organization, you are open to funding, which in most cases it's not the case. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of from the heart to run an organization. It's a very difficult situation.
What percentage of non-profit organisations actually do what they set out to do 12 months after they start? Because I'm sure a couple of friends get together, think this is a good idea. 12 months later, how many of them actually still exist and still succeed?
As we deal with them on a direct basis, it does happen. They come to us and they say they want to register an organization. 3 months down the line, one of the members no more interested. And then that organization now, it loses its control. Because now that is the main thing that here in South Africa, we cannot operate an organization being a single person. It's got to have directors, or it's got to have a committee. And then now, organization, they group themselves, they don't fit one another on what is going to happen, because I might think if you say I must come into the organization, I'm going to add money, or earn money, but that my being there is always on a voluntary basis, but people don't understand that situation.
But that's the trouble, isn't it? And I mean, it's an image issue, I suppose, Pelham, from a perspective of, you want volunteers who've got other sources of income to come in and do the good work.
Well, what we have picked up in the conservation community, and we've picked this up internationally as well as here in South Africa, you have an organization, and a vast percentage of the donor funding, in fact, goes into corporate offices, travel, accommodation, conferences, etc., and very little, as little as 10 cents in the rand, ultimately ends up in true conservation projects. Yeah. And this is a big issue for us, because there are many organizations who will latch onto a save the whatever, but that is their source of existence, because without that save they cannot justify the revenue they're collecting from many cases naive donors.
So often, somebody approaches me for charity and I go, that's fine. What is your cost to income ratio? What does it cost you to run this charity versus the amount of money you get? Yeah. And if it's over 15 or 20%, I start losing interest, because it feels like this is a trough for people to feed off and go and have a nice time. Is that a big problem in the donor sector?
Yes, it does. It does pose a great problem with the donors, because now the donors really want to know they're channeling the money to a person that's going to do the proper job as they.
Do we need regulation that says you may not spend more than 20% of your income on administration? Should we have that rule in South Africa? Should we ask government to change the law around non-profit organizations to make that a fixed cost?
Most of the regulation on money that is donated to the organization, the regulation is emphasized by the person who's donating. He's going to say, I'm donating 10,000, but you must use the money for these purposes only. That's what most of the time they do. And then they state those regulations that this is where you must channel that money.
Is it possible to regulate the administrative cost of a non-profit organization, Pelham?
Well, we were very concerned about this very aspect. Now here I'm wearing a rage hat. And we actually took this matter to the Department of Environmental Affairs, purely because we said there are so many of these organizations. There doesn't seem to be any accountability. We don't know where the money is going. We're certainly not seeing it being spent in the veld saving Rhino. So what is actually happening? And when we completed the exercise, it actually became clear to us that virtually anybody can establish themselves as a NGO or an NPO, and that is not very well regulated. Yes, certainly one does not want to create limitations and frustrations in terms of being an over-regulated industry, but certainly I think that SARS does keep an eye open, and we actually report organizations that we become aware of who are carrying out fraudulent acts. So yeah, I think
there's also a difference between fraud and inefficiency. You could just be a badly run non-profit organization that spends too much money because you think lunches are the way to go to entice people into the fold to donate more money. And it's a big risk. And that leads to this donor fatigue that Pelham was referring to earlier, Dumie, where I, as somebody who does donate money to various causes, you get pretty, tired of wondering, and having to work out all the time where your money is being spent as the charity goes to its next bosberaad, somewhere nice and comfortable that you don't go to yourself because you've just donated the money you might have used to the charity. It's a problem.
It's a big problem on that situation.
How do we fix it?
It's very difficult to follow the transparency of the organization.
But as an association, shouldn't you be overseeing the transparency, making sure that non-profit organizations are transparent, making sure that they are honest about the way in which they do their dealings?
We handle those situations on a situation where we have to do reports on the donated money that they've received. We do handle reports to the departments or to the companies that
which is there a single government department that has oversight over non-profit organizations?
In terms of donations?
In terms of oversight of non-profit organizations, does it fall under the DTI? Okay. Where would it go?
That is the Directorate for Non-Profit Organization. That is the one that is the core body of all the registration of non-profit organizations.
And that's a government body?
That's a government body, yes.
And it doesn't seem to be doing its work very well?
It does work. It does its work very, very well, because now that is where you can even follow and see if the organization is registered very well. And then it has got rules that all organization has got to report on a yearly basis. It stipulates that they must do narrative report, they must do audited financial statements.
Okay, and is it working well enough, Pelham?
Yes, indeed. We are establishing our database of organizations, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we are also creating a spreadsheet now of various projects. So if we know, for example, a Rhino orphanage project is in the competent and safe hands of a particular NGO, then we know we can leave it alone because they are competent and they are audited and they are transparent, so that's fine. So, but we certainly are trying to get the industry cleaner and more credible.
Okay, and that's the risk, isn't it? Because without clean and credible non-profit organisations, legitimate organisations ultimately will suffer. Are you seeing the donor fatigue that Pelham refers to?
Yes, it especially more the companies. The companies might find themselves reluctant to extend further donations.
Well, they're being audited and they're being asked by their boards as to where this money is going. They need to be accountable for it. And I suppose that's probably the first proper health check in a long line of money being donated.
Another disadvantage is on the organizations themselves. They don't follow proper compliance rules because the government has got a rule that it states how the company or the government should donate to an organization, and has got rules that what compliance must they look for at each organization before they can fund.
Now, ultimately, what this results in, Pelham, is the organisation that creates the loudest noise, that appears to be the most credible, ultimately absorbs most of the donor funding, which is good for guys like yourselves wearing the Rage hat, because you've been very successful in establishing brand Rage. It's not such great news for smaller players who struggle with the compliance aspects.
True, but what one would like to believe that those organizations who are not specialists in fundraising can work together, because they're specialists in the example earlier on, raising orphan rhinos. That's fine.
We see consolidation perhaps of non-profit organizations.
Yeah, very much so, and especially when one looks at how much South Africa is under the spotlight internationally. And we need to be able to provide, not only domestically, but internationally, a credible platform to receive donor funding and accountability and assurance that the money is being spent effectively, and that there is delivery at the end of the day.
Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for coming in. Nice to see you both. That was Pelham Jones, Director and Chairman of the Private Rhino Owners Association, also with RAGE, the Rhino Action Group effort, and the Chairman of the Association for Non-Profit Organisations, Dumie Ndlela, joining us in studio this evening as well. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow. Till then, good night and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.